Today, we're going to dig into a question that really, it shapes every single classroom, every lesson plan, and honestly, every student's future. It's a question that seems so simple on the surface, but wow, the answer is anything but.
I mean, it sounds straightforward, doesn't it? A teacher tries something new, you see the students light up, maybe the grades improve, success. But is it really that simple? How do we know for sure? How do we separate a good feeling from, hard proof? And that's the core challenge we're unpacking today, trying to find the real truth in a sea of good intentions.
So, our journey really starts right here. We're stepping beyond the world of hopeful stories and personal beliefs. We're setting out on a search for something a lot more solid, something we can actually call proof. Think about it this way. Would you take some new medicine just because your doctor sincerely believes it'll work? Of course not. You'd want to see the data, the clinical trials, the cold, hard proof. And the same standard really has to apply here. Sincerity is absolutely essential in a teacher, but our kids' education can't be built on good intentions alone. It needs a real foundation of evidence. This slide just captures this huge shift that's happening in education perfectly. We're seeing this massive move from the column on the left over to the right. We're going from these persuasive stories, which, they sound great, but they're unverified, to credible claims that are actually backed up by evidence. It's the difference between saying, I believe this works, and being able to confidently say, I have evidence this works, precisely because it's been tested against other possibilities. So how do we actually make that leap from a good story to solid evidence? Well, this is where a really powerful set of scientific tools comes into play, leading to what a lot of people are calling the causal revolution in education. It's a whole new standard for figuring out what's true. Okay, so at the absolute heart of this revolution is a concept called causal inference, and this is so crucial. It's not just about noticing that two things happen together, like a new teaching method and higher test scores. That's just a correlation. Causal inference is the really rigorous process of proving that one thing actually caused the other. It's the hunt for that unbreakable link. And the engine driving this whole entire process is this amazing mental tool called counterfactual reasoning. And it all boils down to asking one critical question. What would have happened otherwise? What would the test scores have looked like for these exact same students if we hadn't used the new method? See, by comparing what really happened to that imagined alternative, we can finally start to isolate the true impact of what we did. And this is why it's so critical. As some of the pioneers in this field warned, and I'm quoting here, without attention to rival explanations, impact claims become institutional myth. Just think about that for a second. If we don't bother to rule out other possibilities, our so-called impact is just wishful thinking. We're not creating facts, we're literally creating myths. Okay, this is all fascinating theory, I know. But how does it actually work in a real classroom? Let's bring it down to earth for a second and see how teachers themselves can basically become classroom detectives, applying this exact same causal logic. It's done with something called a causal probe, which is really just a simple, ethical way for any teacher to test an idea. It's a 3-step process. Step 1, you measure a baseline to see where the students are starting from. Step 2, you apply the intervention. Introduce that new teaching method. And then, step 3, you measure again to see if a real meaningful change actually happened. It's a simple framework, but it can have really powerful results. But of course, it's not quite that simple, is it? Any good detective knows that just because two things happened one after another doesn't prove a connection. You absolutely have to rule out all the other suspects first. In research, these other suspects are called validity threats. For instance, could some outside event have caused the change? That's what we call a history threat. Or did the students just get better naturally over time because they're older? That's maturation. Or maybe, just maybe, your test group was a little different from the start. That's a selection threat. A true classroom detective has to investigate every single one of these rival explanations before they can close the case. Now, this whole framework of evidence and measurement is incredibly powerful. But there's a flip side. There's a really serious danger that we have to talk about, and it happens when this obsession with proof goes way too far. It's what we'll call the scoreboard trap. And here's the risk, right? When we become obsessed only with the things we can easily measure, we end up producing the beautiful, complex, human process of learning into nothing more than a simple scoreboard. The whole game just becomes about raising test scores, often at the expense of everything else that actually matters. This quote just gets to the absolute heart of the problem.
Truth becomes corrupted when equated with what is easiest to quantify. When that happens, we start chasing what's easy to count, like test scores, and we completely lose sight of what's truly valuable, but maybe a lot harder to measure. Things like creativity, curiosity, resilience, and just a genuine love for learning.
So, where does this leave us? On one hand, we have this powerful tool for finding out what works. On the other, it carries a really serious risk. The challenge then is to find a wiser truth, a more sustainable balance. And this brings us to what might be the most important takeaway from all of this. Causal logic isn't the enemy here. It's an absolutely vital tool for making credible claims. But it cannot be the only tool we use. Because while this science is brilliant at telling us what works, it's completely silent on the much bigger, much more important question of what is worth learning.
The goal, then, is to use these scientific methods without letting them, as the source material warns, colonize the whole purpose of inquiry. We have to hold space for both credible evidence and the unquantifiable magic of learning. At the end of the day, we should use the science to check if our methods are working, but we must never, ever let it dictate why we teach in the first place.
And so we'll leave you with this to think about. In our very justified quest for proof, we have to stay vigilant. We have to keep asking ourselves, if education becomes just a scoreboard, what truths are we missing? What vital, beautiful parts of the human experience of learning are we leaving behind?